All right, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's work group on the fiscal year 2022-2023 Clean Truck and Bus Voucher Incentive Project, or HVIP. My name is Rochelle Bishop, and I'm the manager for our Clean Truck and Bus Incentive Project, better known as HVIP. I'm joined today by several other CARB staff and our partners at CalSTART to share details on the implementation of recent policy changes that were approved by our board in the fiscal year 2022-2023, funding plan for clean transportation incentives, and to share other needed updates. Before we get started, a little information on workgroup logistics. Today's workgroup is being recorded, and a copy of the recording and a list of workgroup attendees will be posted on CARB's Low Carbon Transportation webpage within the next 2 weeks. Today's work group is really intended to be a conversation, so throughout the afternoon, we will pause for questions and comments. At that time, we will ask that you raise your hand to let us know what you'd like to ask a question or make a comment. CARB staff will then unmute your line. For those of you participating via phone, please press 2 or pound 2 to raise your hand. We'll remind you of these instructions throughout the work group, and as always, we appreciate your patience if we run into any technical glitches. We'll start off today by providing some background information on HVIP, followed by updates on funding and our implementation timeline. From there, we'll dive into discussing the implementation of the large fleet bulk purchase requirement that was directed by the board, as well as other recommended changes to increase program flexibilities for public transit agencies. We recognize the unique challenges faced by these public agencies. We will then discuss some updates to definitions, vehicle eligibility requirements, and other necessary changes. Finally, we'll wrap up and discuss next steps for the program. I need to emphasize that this work group is focused entirely on implementation, and that we will provide opportunities to discuss potential policy changes at a future work group meeting. Now, a little background on HVIP. HVIP is the cornerstone of CARB's advanced technology, heavy-duty incentives for on-road zero-emission technologies, including battery electric, fuel cell, and electric power takeoff, or EPTOs. Incentives through HVIP are available statewide on a first-come, first-served basis, with higher voucher amounts available for small fleets located in priority communities. HVIP funds are also being used to pilot the Innovative Small E-Fleets Program, or ISAP, which is designed specifically to help small fleets and independent owner-operators overcome barriers to ZEV market entry. While HVIP started out as a small program with just a handful of eligible medium and heavy-duty technologies, we now have over 150 HVIP eligible zero-emission trucks and buses, showing just how much zero-emission technologies have evolved over the past several years. HVIP's fleet-friendly nature, which intentionally minimizes barriers to adopting zero-emission technologies, has made it an incredibly popular program. Generally, HVIP doesn't require that an existing vehicle be scrapped, making it an ideal way for fleets to try out new technologies or expand their existing fleet. Since HVIP launched in 2009, over 11,400 vouchers have been issued, totaling $844 million. And over 60% of vehicles supported by HVIP will be deployed in priority communities, helping to reduce communities' exposure to dangerous air pollutants as well as noise. I'll now turn it over to Tom Brotherton from CalSTART to discuss the timeline for administration of these funds.
Thank you, Rochelle. So on this slide, you'll see the different categories of funding that have been added through the FY 22-23 funding plan, which passed last December. So the top row are the 3 categories that we're going to discuss today. So that's $265 million for HVIP standard, $70 million for the public transit bus set aside, and $157 million for the drayage truck set aside. Now, in addition to those three categories, there are three additional categories that already have been approved, but are not going to be discussed today. They will be discussed at a future work group meeting. That will be $135 million for the public school bus set aside, $1.125 billion for what's called the Prop 98 school bus replacement grants. This is also school bus funding, but a different source of funding than that for the $135 million public school bus set aside. And finally, $35 million for ISEF, the Innovative Small E-Fleets Initiative. So all three of those will be discussed, just not today. It'll be in a future work group meeting. In addition to the funding for the three on the top row, there's also some carryover money from last year's FY 21-22 funding allocation. In HVIP standard, we have $38 million still left from last year's funding. That gets added to approximately $250 million of voucher funding. That $265 million number you see up there is a combination of both voucher funding and administrative funding. So the voucher funding that's available is going to be about $38 million of last year's funding, plus $250 million of new money, about $288 million of voucher funding. For transit, we've got $44 million of leftover funding from last year to be added to $65 million of new voucher funding upcoming. So that's $109 million altogether. Later in today's meeting, CARB will discuss some flexibilities for transit agencies. You'll see that later today. And finally, drayage. We've got $146 million of voucher funding that will come out of that $157 million total funding. So I'll kick it over to Tara Campi to discuss some of the changes we'll see in this year's project.
Great, thank you, Tom. Good afternoon, everyone. Wanted to clarify that the policy changes that were adopted by the board this past year's funding plan do supersede the existing implementation manual, and a new implementation manual is projected to be published this spring. So the policy changes that went into effect on November 18th and then on January 1st are articulated on the HVIP website and in the Voucher Processing Center. The voucher amount reductions based on fleet size and the bulk purchase requirement for fleets larger than 500, which CARB will discuss in greater detail later in this work group, did go into effect on January 1st. And that voucher reduction is for private fleets with 101 to 500 medium and heavy duty vehicles. It's a voucher reduction of 20%. For private fleets with more than 500, it's a voucher reduction of 50%. However, in order to release the updated implementation manual and upgrades to the Voucher Processing Center and mandatory dealer training, the vouchers submitted that fall into these sizes on or after January 1st will not progress to the status of accepted in the Voucher Processing Center until on or after April 3rd, so that we have time to roll out more nuance, a lot of which will be discussed today. And also, aside from transit properties, the purchase orders need to be no older than March 30th of 2022. So a long window there. And as I mentioned, greater details available on the HVIP website. And I will hand it over to Manuel Aguilar, who will talk about the public school bus set aside.
Hey, Tara, before you go on, I just wanted to add one thing I forgot to mention, and that is we're also going to save 70% of the FY 22-23 standard HVIP funding, along with 70% of the drayage funding that's limited to fleets, private fleets of 100 vehicles or fewer, or any size public fleet. Now, over the course of the year, that money will be released to fleets greater than 100 if there is greater demand than above that 70%. So over the course of the year, that money will be reserved. But the goal here is to allow smaller and mid-sized fleets up to a size of 100 to have access to this funding at least over, say, the first half year, and then diminishing over time so that really anybody can request that funding. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Hand it over to Manuel.
Hi, thanks, Tara. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Manuel Aguila. I'm an air pollution specialist in the Mobile Source Control Division here at CAR. Today, I'll be providing a brief recap of year one of HVIP's public school bus set-aside, along with a projected timeline for year two. I'll also discuss anticipated timeline of Proposition 98 general funds for local education agency school bus replacement grants. As a reminder, funding for the first year of public school bus set-aside is prioritized for small and medium air districts, the list of which can be found in the implementation manual in Appendix G on the HVIP website. Year one of the public school bus set-aside saw a strong demand for replacement of old diesel school buses, becoming oversubscribed and receiving applications for almost 340 zero-emission school buses from 75 different public school districts during the application period. Currently, HVIP is reviewing final application documents and is assisting school districts with progressing through the voucher process. As noted on a previous slide, year two of the public school bus set-aside was allocated $135 million with the funding plan approved by the board this past November. While year one has been very successful, we're looking to build on the success and make updates where we feel they're necessary to make the beginning to end process as smooth as we can for our applicants. As an example of potential updates, California Energy Commission and CARB staff examined the year one application process, and we're jointly working towards making the application process more streamlined and simplified. We're working to make a single application for both the school bus and charging infrastructure and hope to have it ready for year two of the public school bus set-aside. Additionally, we will also be seeking input from interested parties during our school bus work group, which will be held virtually March 14th, 2023, from 9 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. If you're interested in attending the work group, you can be notified of the meeting by signing up for GovDelivery notifications. And now onto this slide. This slide reflects the estimated timeline for year two funds of the public school bus set-aside. Currently, CARB staff, in collaboration with CEC and HVIP and Energize, are working towards establishing work groups in preparation for the upcoming application period. Year two of application opening is expected to start spring of this year, with applications closing later in spring as well. Come summer of 2023, applications are expected to be reviewed and prioritized along with notice to applicants of funding status. After the applicants are notified of the funding status, public school districts who are awarded funding will then work with the dealer or manufacturer of their choice to select a school bus and place a purchase order. Once the new zero-emission school bus is received, the school district will have 12 months to scrap the old school bus from the date of receipt. Next slide, please. In this slide, I'll discuss the Proposition 98 funding for local education agencies school bus replacement grants. As noted in an earlier slide, CARB received $1.125 billion in Proposition 98 general funds from AB 181 for local education agency school bus grants to replace heavy-duty internal combustion engine school buses with zero and low emission school buses. $225 million in funding will be distributed each year over 5 years through HVIP, starting with the 23-24 fiscal year, going through the 27-28 fiscal year. The $1.125 billion was part of the larger $1.5 billion in total allocation from AB 181 for school bus replacement, which covers the zero-emission school bus, the accompanying charging infrastructure, and related costs. The CEC received $375 million to assist school districts in the installation and updates needed to fuel the new zero-emission school buses. CARB and CEC staff are actively working closely together to make the transition to zero-emission school buses as efficient and streamlined as possible. AB 181 set a requirement for DGS, in coordination with CARB and CEC, to establish a statewide procurement contract for public school buses. Currently, DGS has an active work group comprised of public school district representatives that meet to discuss their experiences, needs, and lessons learned with adoption of zero-emission school buses. CARB staff continue to actively work with DGS and CEC to develop public school bus requirements. Once requirements are finalized, DGS will continue their process for setting statewide procurement contracts, with the statewide contracts projected to be in place by late 2023. Once the contracts are in place, CARB will work with HVIP to open a single application window for both school bus and infrastructure funding, which is currently projected to open in early 2024. Once the application period closes in early 2024, application review will take place and is expected to run through mid-2024. Applicants are expected to be notified of their funding status in mid-2024, with awarded school districts placing their purchase orders by late 2024. After buses are manufactured and delivered, school districts will be required to scrap their old buses within 24 months of receipt. Again, this timeline is our current estimate and is subject to change. As a reminder, the March 14th work group will be specific to school buses and charging infrastructure. Make sure you sign up for the Gov delivery if you would like to be notified of the meeting announcements. And next up, we have Olivia Lane, who will be discussing the innovative small e-fleet update.
Hi, everyone. My name is Olivia Lane, air pollution specialist at CARB. So I'm going to be giving a brief update on the Innovative Small E-Fleet program within HVIP, also known as ISEF. The 2021-2022 funding plan established this new program to support small fleets and individual owner operators who are making the transition to zero emission trucks. And it was launched in August of 2022. So the goal of the program was to pilot innovative mechanisms such as all-inclusive leases, peer-to-peer truck sharing, truck as a service, assistance with infrastructure, and individual owner planning assistance. So in the first round of voucher requests, the Innovative Small E-Fleet pilot exceeded expected demand. The original $25 million included in the funding plan was increased to $35 million in order to meet the demand. And 73 unique fleets applied, of which 69% were domiciled in disadvantaged communities. The average fleet size of those that applied was 5 vehicles. And for funding year 2022-2023, another $35 million has been set aside for the Innovative Small E-Fleet projects. Next slide. So the lessons learned from this first round of the Innovative Small E-Fleet pilot will be used to inform changes to HVIP and CARB's broader heavy-duty incentive policies as we continue to target smaller fleets. A separate work group will be held this spring where staff will share a review of the 2021-2022 projects. We will also discuss and solicit feedback on expanding project types, approaches to project selection, and other proposed implementation changes to the pilot program. After we workshop potential updates to the pilot, we will release an updated implementation manual by July. After that, we will solicit new providers and conduct dealer trainings, and then open the program for more voucher request applications in August. So please keep an eye out for a Gov delivery email notice announcing the upcoming Innovative Small E-Fleet work group, where we're going to be going into more detail about this pilot. And now I will turn it over to Eric Brown, who's going to moderate a short discussion period.
Thank you, Olivia. Just so everybody knows, if you dialed in, make sure you press #0, #2 to raise your hand. If not, you can click the raise hand button down on the bottom of the Zoom webinar. When I call on you to speak, please state your name and affiliation. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Philippe. You can go ahead and unmute your mic and ask your question.
Hi, my name is Philippe Gerritsen with Nikola Corporation. If you could go back to slide 5, I had a question about what the meaning was about not accepting new vouchers until March 30th, 22. You know what, it says 2022. I was thinking of 23. So any vouchers that we submit, voucher requests and purchase orders that we submit as of January 1st this year, would be valid, correct? They would still get processed, time-stamped, et cetera, to establish a place in line for customers that would be seeking to purchase these zero-emission vehicles.
Yes, that's a great question. Thank you for clarifying. So requests that were placed on or after January 1st for the large fleet, simply because of the nuances involved with the bulk purchase requirement and the fleet size voucher reductions, they absolutely have their place in queue and have their funding set aside, but they won't progress to having the status of accepted and having terms and conditions signed until on or after April 3rd, so that we can provide more details about those policy changes. And then the purchase order date, typically in recent past years of HVIP, when we've reopened, we have been reopening from a period of being shut down due to lack of funding. That's not the case this year. So we wanted to clarify that the purchase orders can go all the way back until March 30th of 2022 and still be valid.
Okay, thank you. And that ultimately refers to the date that the purchase order was placed, not anything relating to desired delivery date. It's simply when that purchase order was executed, and then the date of the voucher application would set the time frame or the order in which vouchers would be processed. Correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Sure.
Okay, next we're going to go to Mark. Go ahead, Mark.
Thank you. Mark Roost with Sustainable Energy Inc. and advisor to the Silicon Valley Clean Cities Coalition. On slides 6 and 7, you went to the last item on each one is old bus scrap.
Hey, Mark, I think there's something kind of going on with your microphone. Can you get a little closer maybe to the mic? Or
Are you talking about the noise, or are you talking about being able to hear me?
I can hear you. It's that noise in the background.
Yeah, I can't. That's a hard drive issue that I can't change.
Okay.
So the old bus is scrapped. So I understand. I'm reassured that in the HVIP program, you don't have to scrap the bus. If you are converting the bus, you scrap the engine. If you're converting the bus to battery electric. And on slide 7, it's got that 1898 or something, Prop 98. Is that different? Where it says old buses scrapped, can it be old engine scrapped? And we refurbish the vehicle and replace the engine with a battery electric powertrain?
Hey, thanks for the question, Mark. Great question. So I think what you were referring to is HVIP standard. So the Prop 98 actually specifically indicates that this is a scrappage program. So for Prop 98 funding, it does require a bus to be scrapped in order to receive a new zero emission school bus. And it's the same for the set aside, where it is also a scrappage program, but the HVIP standard is not.
Did you have a follow-up, Mark? I just muted you because of the background noise.
Thank you. That makes sense. So the set aside is the 70% of funds, right?
The set aside is up to $400,000 per bus. And that's usually going to cover, if not the entire cost of the bus, the vast majority of it. It can change depending on any features and additions that the school districts make.
I believe that converting the old buses, even with today's batteries, would cost less than $200,000, and at least with the people that I'm aware of. And so you could get twice as many buses running electric as if you convert them as if you buy them new. And there is a company that is currently doing a demonstrator bus conversion to battery electric of a demonstrator bus. They actually did one 8 years ago. A 40-foot Bluebird school bus was converted. and there have been delays, loss of a company, and things like that. But the technology has been improved greatly. It's better performance than others, and we want to have a business model where we can get equal funding, get full share of funding, and get priority for these converting these buses. And that means you don't have to wait for the old buses to be ready to retire, but you can do the old buses and you can do newer buses. A new bus that's diesel that was bought 3 years ago could be converted and they would still save money.
Yeah, and I believe HVIP standard would still support conversions. I'm not positive, but I would definitely recommend you attend the March work group. If you want to provide further comment, we are kind of building out additional information for the coming years, the funding.
March 4th.
14th.
14th. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mark. Next is Irvi. Go ahead, Irvi.
All right. Am I unmuted now?
You are unmuted.
Great. I was wondering how you
Please state
envision
your affiliation and your full name.
Irvi Negrani, currently unaffiliated, and I was wondering specifically how CARB envisions the infrastructure timeline working, because the timelines proposed here seem very vehicle centric, quite easy to get a vehicle manufactured in that time, but some utilities are significantly slower with interconnections if you need more power for your fleet. And so most utilities also require a purchase order before they will start doing engineering to bring power. Does that impact the eligibility for, either extending the timeline for scrappage requirements, or is there some other way that CARB is envisioning the infrastructure planning working alongside these vouchers?
I'm sorry, is this in regards to the school bus funding, or?
Both for school buses and for other fleets. Just in general, you've mentioned for everything that requires scrappage, it's somewhere between 12 to 24 months, but that's not always the timeline that you would see on the infrastructure side.
Right. So one of the things that we're actually actively working on is getting the utilities involved a little bit earlier for the school bus scrappage requirements. So you're right. Sometimes the utilities do take a little bit longer. Fortunately, the utilities that I've worked with, PG&E, SDGE, SCE, if you are awarded a voucher, they're typically a lot more receptive and able to move forward prior to actually having a purchase order in hand. But they want to kind of know how many buses that the school district is expected to receive to kind of move forward in the process. And that's one of the things that we're working on to make sure that the utilities get involved as early as possible so we don't delay the infrastructure completion and the actual usage of the buses.
So one thing which I would love to see CARB work with, given especially that the school bus funding is going to be going on for several fiscal years, is working with the utility to understand the total fleet side, because a lot of times when you go to utilities and you say, all right, I've got a purchase order for X many vehicles for this fiscal year, they're going to start planning power procurement for exactly that number of vehicles, even if the goal is eventually we want to transition, 30 buses instead of 5, but there's going to be 5 this year. I think if CARB could, work with the Public Utilities Commission to make sure that utilities have to plan for the total fleet conversion, that would help in terms of reducing the number of construction projects and therefore overall costs and disruptions of deployments over time.
Right, I agree. I think it's good to work for the entire fleet. Sometimes it's not technically feasible to be able to plan the entire fleet right at this time. But generally, when we do work with the utilities and we have the school districts work with utilities, it's not the here and now how many you're receiving, it's your 5 or 10 year plan. So I know specifically with PG&E, they require X number of buses to actually participate in their program, and they also want to know what your 5-year plan is. So it is I agree, it's not just here and now type of assessment. It should be something a little further on down the line.
Glad to hear that the utilities have updated their thinking. The last time I spoke with them on a school bus project, it was still very much more antiquated.
Yeah, I think we want to make sure that they don't come out too frequently, because then you just increase the cost of and construction time of getting everything done. So we try to make sure that they're planning ahead.
Okay, we got a lot of quick hands up, so I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next person. You guys can follow up with emails after the meeting. The next person is going to be Beverly. Beverly, go ahead. I've unmuted your mic. Please state your name and affiliation.
Hi, Beverly Deschaux. I am the president of the Electric Vehicle Association of the Central Coast. We are 100 chapters across the country, and we're the original introducers of electric vehicles to our whole area. I have a few questions. One is, I understand your reasoning of why you want to not require the vehicles to be scrapped for just the heavy duty ones with the HVIP, because you want to incentivize owner operators to buy them. However, they're going to stay on the road. I mean, so I realize you want to keep that incentive, but what I want to suggest is that if you don't require scrapping immediately, to at least have some timeline on there where you do require it to be scrapped or converted, because our whole purpose is to get the stinky ones off the road, the highly polluting ones off the road, and not just adding more resources to a fleet. Secondly, I want to remind you that we've had the conversation before about how many vehicles should be considered a small fleet, and 100 was definitely not it. I believe that we talked about 50 and we talked about 10 as being priorities for small fleets. So I would like to see that, I don't know, maybe some kind of system where you have priority on even smaller fleets, the 10 to 50 size. I was going to suggest something other than what the other caller said about the school buses, the conversions, but I like his version even better. What I was going to suggest, because just scrapping things when there's a lot of perhaps useful life left in the body of the vehicle itself, seems a waste. So what if it's been on my list of things to do and I haven't done, to find out what community colleges in California actually have an automotive program. And that would be a fantastic program for them to have the availability of that vehicle, a school bus, to convert, and they learn the technology, and then it has the advantage of being able to be recycled back into the community. But if not, the company which the previous caller mentioned, who is doing the conversions, I think that's a better idea than just, scrapping them. Also, I want to suggest, and I've talked with you for the past couple of years about it, not you personally, but CARB, about that you now have, you are now funding infrastructure for the charging. And I want to suggest that you make available bidirectional charging. As we know now, the grid will be wanting that, and especially from school buses. Maybe not transit buses so much, but definitely school buses that are sitting a large part of the day, and definitely sitting during the summer and sitting on weekends. And they can be great resources for the grid, as well as for the school itself, being possibly a resilience hub for emergencies and like that. So they, electric school buses are mobile energy storage units. They can also show up to emergency situations. Other places in the country are actually coordinating school buses with their emergency response teams because they are available once they're charged up. Also, one of our schools, I'm in the Santa Cruz area, one of our schools is having their charging set up right now by PG&E for their school buses, but it's not by where their solar panels are. So somehow that would be, I don't know how to include that, but I just want to mention it. A lot of our elementary schools, a lot of our schools in the county have solar. So thinking, well, for many purposes, to have the school buses being able to charge from the solar panels is the ultimate in reducing our emissions, I think.
Thanks, Beverly. And I just wanted to chime in and say we totally agree on a lot of these points. We actually are, and you'll see later in this presentation, adding requirements that any school bus that is funded through HVIP have V2G technology. And we do have a number of other programs within CARB that really looks at the schools holistically to support other types of zero emission technologies and things like solar. I also wanted to acknowledge, I know earlier you raised a couple questions about fleet size. We totally agree with you. We don't consider fleets of 100 or less to be small fleets. Really, we're considering that range to be medium and small fleets. We do have higher incentives available now, a 15% increase for fleets with 10 or fewer vehicles. And we're working to really start to phase HVIP to really focus on those fleets of 50 or fewer. I know you've raised a lot of great points, and we're really happy to continue this dialogue one-on-one, but we are running a little short on time and need to start moving on to the next topic. So feel free to reach out to me and we can discuss a bit further if you have more comments.
Okay, do we have time to take one more, or should we move? Or are we going to move on?
Let's go ahead and move on.
Okay. So we're going to go ahead and move on. I'm going to lower everybody's hands. Just everybody remember that you can follow up. If your question doesn't get answered by the end of the presentation, you can follow up with CARB staff.
All right. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Andrea Morgan. I'm a staff air pollution specialist at CARB working on our school bus programs. And I'm here this afternoon to talk a little bit about the new bulk purchase requirements that have taken effect in HVIP. So in November, our board approved the introduction of a new bulk purchase requirements that took effect in January of this year. So essentially what this requirement is that private fleets with more than 500 vehicles now need to present a purchase order for at least 30 HVIP eligible vehicles. And the HVIP incentive will then be applied for each vehicle purchase above that initial 30. The initial 30 vehicles and the vehicles that receive HVIP vouchers all must be domiciled in California, and the vehicles receiving HVIP vouchers must be domiciled in a disadvantaged community. Only HVIP eligible vehicles will count towards the bulk purchase requirements, meaning that zero emission light duty vehicles or off-road vehicles, including yard trucks, cannot be used to count towards that initial 30 vehicles. So a few administrative clarifications and updates to the bulk purchase requirement that we're discussing today. We are considering allowing large fleets to count orders from multiple manufacturers or dealers so that fleets are able to purchase multiple vehicle types and brands that best meet their needs. In instances where this mixing and matching occurs, the purchaser will determine which vehicles in their order should receive HVIP vouchers and will coordinate this request with their dealer or dealers. For the purposes of the requirement that vehicles receiving vouchers must be domiciled in a disadvantaged community, we are considering expanding that to allow for vehicles to be domiciled in disadvantaged communities, disadvantaged and low-income communities within half a mile of a disadvantaged community, and low-income households within half a mile of disadvantaged communities. So this change will allow large fleets that are purchasing vehicles to be domiciled in those areas that are directly surrounding disadvantaged communities to qualify for HVIP vouchers. And we believe that this change will help to deliver benefits to communities facing disproportionate pollution burdens consistent with our board's direction. So just another clarification on this bulk purchase requirements. Again, this only applies to private fleets with 500 or more vehicles, and it does not apply to public agencies, and it does not apply to any fleet that's purchasing a fuel cell vehicle, recognizing that those vehicles are in much earlier stages of development. So with that, we'll go ahead and open this up for questions. So Eric, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, sounds good. Just so everybody knows, we're taking questions right now on the topic of the large fleet bulk purchase requirements. We moved on from the prior topic. So if we have time at the end, we can go back to it, but these questions should all be about the bulk purchase requirement. And with that, I'm going to unmute Jennifer's mic. Go ahead, Jennifer. Please state your name and affiliation.
AT&T, I order the heavy vehicles. My question on that is, so I just ordered 34 e-transit vans. The way I'm reading this, we would only be able to get the incentive on anything over 30. So the quantity of 4 is what we would qualify for. Is that correct?
If you have more than 500 vehicles, then yes, that is correct.
Is it still a max of 30 per year?
So it is still a max of 30 per year for most vehicle types, with the exception of drayage trucks. If you're purchasing drayage trucks, you can have a max of 50 per year. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You are welcome.
Okay, our next question is going to come from Lacey. Lacey, go ahead and unmute your mic and please state your name and affiliation.
Hi, Lacey Robertson with Rush Enterprises. On the 500 vehicles, does it apply to their California fleet, or is it if a national fleet has 1,000 trucks that are located all over the country, but only one truck in California? How does that work?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it does apply when we're counting that fleet size. It applies to what is owned and operated within California. And we're also only looking at the medium and heavy duty vehicles. So fleets do not need to count light duty vehicles towards determining what their fleet size is for the purpose of this provision, or for the purpose of determining if they're subject to any voucher reductions.
Okay, is it only registered in California, or is it like if a vehicle enters the state? So if it's like registered in Indiana, but they have trucks that enter California, randomly, how does that work?
Yeah, so we will be looking at vehicles that are operated within California. We'll certainly be checking vehicle registrations as one way to determine that, but we'll also be using other tools within our toolbox to help verify fleet size.
Okay, so like how does a fleet themselves figure out what their number is? If they have 1,000 vehicles registered in Indiana with apportioned plates, and but they have no vehicles registered in California or domiciled within the state, but they do have trucks that come in and out, how does that work?
Yeah, so we are primarily looking at the domicile location. So that would be the main suggestion that I would have for folks, is to look at where they are domiciled. But we're certainly happy to work with fleets and help provide clarification if folks have specific questions or need to run scenarios by us when they have those sorts of complicated fleet distributions.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, our next question is going to come from I'm sorry about your name, Donnell? Donnell? Go ahead, I've unmuted your microphone. Danielle Jones? No? Okay. I'm gonna lower your.
All right.
Oh, there you go.
There we go. There we go. I was recording for. My name is Darlene, like Colleen.
Darlene, apologize.
Correct. Exactly. It's quite all right. It's quite all right. So
Please state your affiliation.
Yes, I'm about to say that I'm the CEO of Abundance Worldwide Enterprises. And thank you for sending out your emails and keeping me engaged. So I originally wanted to apply for this voucher for, we want electric dump trucks, and they're not on the market yet. So we're gonna have to buy one of those semis. And now that we're in a larger of the bundle category, you said this was, bulk category. Can we can we apply for 15 what do you call them, the electric Peterbilt dump trucks, and then use the other 15 for electric charter buses? That's my question.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So if you are in that category of having over 500 vehicles within your fleet in California, you would need to purchase a total of 30 vehicles before you would be eligible for the HVIP incentive. I do want to note that if by dump truck you're referring to like trash pickup trucks, there are a couple eligible within HVIP currently. So you can go on the HVIP eligibility web page and see a full list of like the refuse fleets, but recognize that might not be exactly what you're looking for.
No, I'm not. No, we're not.
Okay.
Not into trash hauling. We're in the
dirt. Okay.
rock, sand, and gravel. Right. To the construction.
Perfect. Understood.
Site. Right. Yeah. Building buildings.
Okay.
Like the California High-Speed Rail project, for a prime example.
Yes. Okay.
They're going to need a lot of trucks,
Mhm.
and we would like to be the first minority-owned company with our first electric dump trucks. That's our goal.
Yeah. Okay.
So do we need a voucher for each truck? That was another question I'm confused about right there. For each one that we purchase, we need a voucher for each one, correct? Is that what I'm understanding today?
Yeah, so the way HVIP works, you would need a voucher for essentially for each truck that you're purchasing, but you'd be working with an HVIP eligible dealer who'd help fill out the paperwork and such for you. And you can put those requests in as a batch, essentially. Again, you would need to, if you're in the over 500 category, you would need to purchase 30 first without the HVIP incentive, and then you'd be able to purchase an additional 30 trucks with that HVIP incentive attached to it.
Okay, can we order straight from the manufacturer without going to a dealer, or is that not correct? We can't do it.
There are some manufacturers that are able to submit HVIP voucher requests. I'd encourage you to go to californiahvip.org, and there's a list of vehicles on there, and it'll show who is approved dealers or manufacturers to sell the vehicles through the HVIP website, and they'll be able to help you with actually submitting a voucher request.
We've got a lot of hands up, so I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next question. I think we've got time for a few more questions before we get into the next topic. With that, Andy Schwartz, I have unmuted your microphone. Please state your name and affiliation.
Yeah, Andy Schwartz with Tesla. Yeah, thanks for the explanation today. Real quick question, Andre. I think you mentioned it before, but I maybe missed it a little bit. So for the 30 vehicles that are needed to meet the bulk purchase requirement, sorry, you said those need to be domiciled in California, but they're not subject to the DAC requirement. Is that right?
Yes, so that initial 30 do need to be domiciled within California, but they're not subject to the DAC requirements. It would be any vehicle that is actually receiving the HVIP voucher would be subject to that DAC requirements. And as I mentioned, we are considering expanding that somewhat so that low-income communities and low-income households that are located close to a disadvantaged communities, fleets that have their vehicle domiciled there, those vehicles would also be eligible.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, I think we got time for 2 more questions. Colin, I've unmuted your microphone. Please state your name and affiliation. Sorry, I just muted you. You're gonna have to unmute yourself again.
Can you hear
There
me?
you go.
Hi, Colin Lay from Kenworth Truck, Zero Emission Vehicle Grant and Technical Specialist. Just curious on the background of the rule change for the bulk fleet rule and you know, how that came about and evolved from last year's policies.
Sure, I can give a quick high-level recap on that. So this was a change that was approved by our board this past November. We did discuss it at public work group meetings in September of last year. And essentially, after reviewing some additional data that we had collected, as well as legislative direction and the state of the zero emission vehicle market, we made some changes to existing policies which were in place. Initially, we had a policy that would have taken effect January 1st of this year that would have limited HVIP eligibility to only fleets with 100 vehicles or fewer.
Yeah, that was going to be a pretty detrimental one for a lot of our customers.
So this bulk purchase requirements and voucher reductions, there's based off of fleet size, came into effect as an alternative and were approved by our board in November. So it provides a little bit more flexibility to help us really continue to accelerate the market to zero emission before the proposed advanced clean fleets regulation has deadlines that start to take effect. As well as really the goal with the bulk purchase is really to help get some large orders that help build up volumes and economies of scale within manufacturing facilities for zero emission vehicles. I do want to note, as I mentioned earlier, this was approved by our board. So that overall framework for the bulk purchase requirements is in effect and is something that's not changing this year. But we are discussing today some of the implementation details as to how we're going to make it happen. So we certainly welcome comments on that element of the proposal.
Okay,
thank you.
Our last question on this topic is going to come from Janice. Janice, I have unmuted your microphone. You're going to unmute on your end. Please state your name and affiliation.
Janice Thomas, Navistar, I believe you have already.
Oops.
I think we may have lost Janice, but
we lost Janice.
Sounded like she said we answered the question, so hopefully that's the case.
Okay, with that, I'll do one more then. We'll go to Dan. Go ahead, Dan. Dan Potter. Please state your name and affiliation.
Yeah, thanks. This is Dan Potter from Daimler Truck. Andrea, I had a quick question or maybe a request. You kind of talked about how you will qualify a fleet for these large purchase requirements and whether we're talking about the entire national fleet or the fleet within California and whether it's domiciled or registered. Or I would really request that CARB be very specific in those instructions about what that means in the implementation manual, because a lot of our customers really struggle with understanding what their California fleet is. So, you know, they have vehicles that move in and out of California all day. Do those count? They're not domiciled there. They're not registered there. They don't know the answer to that question, and they need to be able to qualify for this plan. So, you know, certainly CARB already has definitions for the California fleet written into the Advanced Clean Fleet Rule and the truck and bus rule, and I'm sure you're familiar with lots of that stuff. But I would just ask you be very, very specific there.
Absolutely understood. And we will certainly make every effort to do that. I think our intent is really to, wherever possible, mirror definitions that are already used, like what is proposed in advanced clean fleets and what is in truck and bus. But we will be sure to lay this out as clearly as possible in the implementation manual. So I appreciate that comment.
I really appreciate that. And wherever you guys land on that, I think people would like to have feedback on that, because honestly, the truck and bus requirement and the CARB Advanced Clean Fleet requirements specifically do include vehicles that just sort of transitorily enter California and not vehicles that are domiciled the way that you suggested. So yeah, a lot of room for uncertainty there.
Understood. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, I'm going to lower everybody's hands and we'll move on to the next topic.
Okay, mic test. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Leslie.
Thank you. Sorry, I didn't get a chance to do that earlier. Hi, I'm Leslie Goodbody and I work with the HVIP team. I'm covering the flexibilities that we are considering specifically for public transit agencies to better align HVIP funding with FTA funding and to recognize the processes that transit agencies must use to plan for and purchase buses. Our partners at CalSTART did a deep dive to better understand how to increase interest in the transit set-aside funds. The following flexibilities were developed based on that feedback. First, we would allow public transit agencies to submit a letter of intent or LOI in lieu of a purchase order at the point of voucher request submission. The date of signature on the LOI may be no earlier than January 1st, 2023. And a purchase order or other binding agreement will be required within 6 months of submission. Otherwise, the voucher request will be canceled. Specific letter of intent requirements are spelled out in the implementation manual. Next, transit voucher requests that have reached funding set-aside status may be used to leverage HVIP funds with other funding sources that encourage or require local match funds, including formula or competitive funding from the Federal Transit Administration. This allowance includes voucher requests submitted with an LOI in lieu of a purchase order. We are also considering extending the redemption requirement from 18 months to 36 months for public transit vouchers to account for lengthy procurement timelines and bus acceptance processes. And finally, we recognize that all public transit agencies are required to meet compliance deadlines with the Innovative Clean Transit Regulation, or ICT. To evaluate whether a transit agency is eligible for HVIP, we first look at statewide compliance with ICT. If the total number of zero-emission buses operating in the state exceeds ICT compliance requirements, the applicant will be eligible for HVIP. If not, only applicants that have exceeded their individual ICT compliance requirements will be eligible. This flexibility makes sense for public transit sector, given the role that they play in VMT reductions and the fact that they rely almost entirely on public funding. And so now we're going to turn it over questions. So for Eric to lead that effort.
Okay, same deal as last time. Right now we're only accepting questions on flexibility for public transit agencies. And with that, I'm going to unmute Michael's microphone. Michael, go ahead and state your name and affiliation.
All right. Good afternoon, folks. It's Michael Pimentel, Executive Director of the California Transit Association, representing 220 member organizations statewide. Just want to begin with some comments, and that is just to simply thank CARB and the CalSTART team for proposing these new flexibility options for public transit agencies. These flexibilities fully align with the priorities that we have established as an association for the HVIP program through our ZEV task force, and also reflect very well the partnership that I believe has been established between the transit industry and the state to deliver to transit agencies the resources that they need to make their long-term transition goals a reality. As I thank CARB and CalSTART for these new flexibilities, I also want to, in the same breath, recommend a few others. First, our industry is facing significant supply chain issues that have increased the cost of purchasing ZEBs, as well as an operating funding crisis that is going to create some financial pressures on agencies that will challenge capital projects, including the purchase of new zero-emission buses. And so with that, I would recommend that CARB consider increasing the voucher amount for HVIP transit to align with the bus voucher amounts that were established in the VW Mitigation Trust. There, that would look like a 30 to 50% increase in the voucher amount, depending on the technology pathway. And then finally, this is more of a process consideration, would recommend creating quarterly funding availabilities for HVIP to establish more regular anchor points for agencies accessing HVIP vouchers. I'll acknowledge that today, while we've got capacity, there aren't necessarily runs on HVIP in the way that we've seen them in years past, but certainly if we find ourselves with fewer resources moving forward, having this quarterly break will provide agencies with some greater certainty that they can access the funds throughout the year. And so thank you for your time. Again, thanks for these flexibilities. I'll turn it back to you all.
Thank you, Michael. Okay, our next question or comment is going to come from Jason. Jason, go ahead. I've unmuted your mic.
Hi, Jason Huang from Orange County Transportation Authority. We also wanted to show our thanks and support for the flexibility for public transit agencies. We're currently accelerating our zero emission bus rollout, and these changes will help us transition much quicker than we planned. The 36-month voucher redemption change is helpful because we're seeing delays in delivery times due to supply chain shortages and costs have been an issue for zero emission buses. Second, the letter of intent is helpful as well. We've attempted to use HVIP in our low-no and bus facilities applications in the past, but it was deemed too unreliable. And our recent bus purchases included HVIP funding and finance plans, but we were unable to obtain HVIP due to purchase order requirements, and that required us to seek additional funds to cover for the differences. So the letter of intent will greatly improve the reliability of these funds. I think that's it for me. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jason. Our next comment or question is going to come from Ryan. Ryan, go ahead. I've unmuted your microphone.
Yeah, hi. Good afternoon, CARB staff. Ryan Lau, External Affairs Representative at AC Transit. AC Transit is the largest bus-only transit agency in the state of California. I will just +1 for everything that was just said. I think you're all aware of the financial challenges that the public transit industry has faced during the pandemic. And as the federal relief funds sort of start to get used up, we're looking at financial challenges in the future. At the same time, the industry is wants to maintain its commitment toward the state's climate action and air quality goals. And as the ICT first requirements go into effect, we're sort of getting squeezed. And so that really is why it's super important and much appreciated that CARB and CARB staff has had this ongoing great working relationship with the industry. We absolutely appreciate the $70 million set aside, and then additionally these flexibilities for public transit agencies in the HVIP program. All of them are terribly helpful. But in particular, I think this last point of having the statewide requirements being utilized for individual transit agencies as opposed to having to individually qualify is super important to the long-term sustainability of the industry, but also just helping to continue that forward momentum toward moving towards zero emission. And additionally, to Michael Pimentel's point, I do think that that sort of incremental for the HVIP vouchers would be hugely helpful, considering all the supply chain and inflationary pressures that we're having to deal with vehicle purchases, as well as the sort of quarterly release of HVIP funding that would sort of help provide some level of certainty to agencies. So really appreciate all your help with this, and looking forward to working with you.
Thank you, Ryan. Our next question or comment is going to come from Doran. Doran, go ahead. I've unmuted your microphone.
There we go. Thank you very much. Doran Barnes. I serve as the Chief Executive Officer of Foothill Transit in Southern California, and also chair the California Transit Association Zero Emission Vehicle Task Force. And you can't see me, but my pom-poms are shaking in the air. Yes, thank you. This is wonderful. Really appreciate the CARB team leaning in and helping us on this zero emission journey. The flexibility that you've offered here will really make a huge difference in our ability to advance these programs and continue to lean in on the technology. So I would ditto everything that the prior transit speakers have shared with you, extend my thanks. And the one area that I would underline and put an exclamation point behind personally would be the ask to consider that you match the HVIP voucher program to the VW mitigation trust fund levels. Again, there's huge cost pressures that we're facing, and the ability to access those dollars to continue to advance in our journey would be very helpful.
I'd like to chime in for just a second. There's a reason why the voucher amounts for Volkswagen are a little bit higher than what's offered in HVIP, and that's because Volkswagen has a scrap requirement. And we realize that transit agencies are able to sell their rolling stock at auction and get some revenue from that when they sell their buses that they don't have to scrap. And so that was definitely factored into the voucher amount that we developed for the Volkswagen Trust. So just want to make sure people are aware of that.
Yeah, that's really helpful, and perhaps maybe a consideration could be to give the option to have the higher level of the scrap requirement versus the lower level. I know for what we get in terms of auction price for buses, it's a minimal amount of funding. So I just offer that up for something for your possible consideration, and thanks for clarifying that.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you.
I would love to chat with you offline, Doran, because I would like to know more about the scrap market just for our VW program. Thanks.
Let's chat.
Okay, good.
Thanks.
Okay, we got time for a couple more questions. The next person up is going to be Hillary. Hillary, please, you can unmute your microphone. Please state your name and affiliation.
Thank you. Hillary Blackerby from Santa Barbara Metropolitan Transit District. First, want to thank and the work group for coming up with these flexibilities. They're spot on. Definitely need all of them to go into effect. And the comments about the higher voucher amount is definitely, I would be appreciated, as Mr. Barnes was saying. Those auction proceeds for the buses are negligible at best in what I've seen, as assuming you've used your bus to the end of its useful life, which we all do, of course. Having the ability to have a quarterly funding availability is helpful, because we're always trying to piece together funding from different sources, which is why that local match is really helpful. And of course, the letter of intent in lieu of purchase orders is great, and hopefully the utilities will catch up on that as well for the infrastructure piece. So appreciate all of your work on this and your partnership. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Hillary. Okay, our last question on this question or comment on this topic is going to come from Catherine. Catherine, I have unmuted your microphone. You unmute on your end and ask away.
Hi, yeah, Kathy Studwell, San Francisco Municipal Transportation Agency. I'd also like to thank you for the $70 million set aside for public transit agencies, which serve the public. I have a question for clarification and then another question for clarification. You were talking about, Leslie, the relationship with the ICT. And did I hear you correct that HVIP vouchers that agencies that have not met their ICT mandate would not be eligible for HVIP vouchers?
No, the flexibility that we're offering right now is what we'll be looking at for HVIP eligibility from any applicant, is whether or not we've reached or we're exceeding the statewide requirements. So look at the entire compliance requirement of all of the transit agencies in a given year. If we've exceeded that requirement, then the applicant is eligible for funding, even if they haven't. However, if we haven't exceeded the statewide requirement, then we look at it on an individual transit agency basis and whether that transit agency is exceeding their compliance requirement.
I'll have to look into that in greater detail. The other question for clarification is, do public agencies have to meet the DAC requirement? In other words, to be located within a disadvantaged area, like the private fleets.
I can chime in here. So no, that's what we were discussing with the bulk purchase requirements and that disadvantaged community requirement does not apply to public agencies. So that's not something that public transit agencies would have to worry about.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, we're going to go ahead and move on to the next topic.
Hey, good afternoon. I'm Patrick Chen, and today I'll be providing updates to HVIP definitions and requirements. So this year, as part of our 2R initiative to double the number of zero-emission refuse trucks in California, we introduced a limited time 25% voucher enhancement to support purchase of zero-emission refuse collection vehicles. Oh, there you go. For the voucher enhancement, we're considering defining a refuse collection vehicle as a vehicle that collects garbage, including front load, rear load, side load, or other garbage packer. This does not include roll-off or waste transfer. Today, we're looking for feedback on whether this definition is appropriate and what types of documentation should be required to be eligible for the refuse collection vehicle plus-up. Next slide. With fleet size limits, we're updating the definition of common ownership or control and modifying it to align it more closely with the Advanced Clean Fleets regulation. For example, a company that hires contractors to conduct work on their behalf are required to count those vehicles towards their fleet size. On the other hand, if the purchaser is a contractor for a larger fleet or is operating vehicles under an agreement through a competitive bid, they're only required to count those vehicles in their company's fleet. And with that, we'll open up for some questions and comments.
Okay, our first comment is going to come from Adreno. Adreno, I have unmuted your microphone. Please state your name and affiliation.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Adrian Martinez, and I'm an attorney with Earth Justice. First of all, thank you for implementing this refuse collection program in the last plan. I think it's a really important aspect, and I agree with the HVIP website, which says zero emission refuse trucks are here, and we need to just deploy more of them. I guess I will follow up with some thoughts on the definition, but I have one comment on this program as it relates to ACF. It seems like there might be a tension between the incentive programs and ACF and how it's looking at waste collection vehicles. And I think this is going to have a particular impact in the South Coast, given that we have a very, very large number of CNG refuse trucks. It just seems like maybe there's a difference of understanding on the technology and where it is. we look at this and recent analysis showing that there'll be a huge uptick in zero emission refuse trucks in the near future. And the concern I have is if the ACF refuse exemption is written too large, it's going to put too much pressure on HVIP. And while I think spending on refuse trucks now is good, down the road, I think there's compelling considerations that more money should go to things like transit agencies and other things rather than large waste hauling companies. And so I'd wonder if someone could give some indication how, because I know that policy hasn't fully been vetted on the refuse, and how are the interaction between these two programs? Because I'm a little concerned that if the exception's written way too broad, as some are advocating for an ACF, it will put a lot of pressure on HVIP to, fund basically the conversion to zero emission refuse trucks. Thank you.
Hey, just to clarify, were you talking about the definitions for common ownership and control and the refuse collection vehicle definition? Because those are two separate issues in this case. But I'll let someone else answer the questions regarding the refuse truck.
Thanks, Pat, and thanks, Adrian. I'll chime in a little bit on the refuse truck. I think, well, as you noted, and as we say on the HVIP website, we do think that refuse is ready for zero emission. I can't speak too much as to what's going on the ACF side. We certainly want to make sure that our regs team who aren't here today are really the authority on ACF. So I don't want to risk misspeaking here, but no, we are working closely with them to align programs. And so while we do have this short-term plus up within HVIP as part of our 2R, our Refuse Reimagined initiative, to really try to increase those initial early deployments of zero emission refuse trucks. That is a limited term enhancements, really geared again towards those early deployments. So it is something that we are working on and happy to pull together both teams and talk a bit more if needed.
Thank you.
Okay, our next question is going to come from Beverly. Beverly, go ahead. I've unmuted your microphone.
Hi, Beverly Deschaux again. You'll be happy to know it's a quick question.
Okay, Beverly, please restate your affiliation again.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm with the Electric Vehicle Association of Central Coast of California. The question is, what exactly are the incentives for the refuse trucks? Because I would like to have a meeting with our public works manager to discuss that.
So right now we have the 25% increase in the voucher amount. So that's the increase on the base voucher amount. So for a Class 8 zero emission refuse truck, the typical Class 8 voucher amount is $120,000. So it'll be 25% above that. And I cannot do the math right now.
All right, thank you.
Okay, well, I'm not seeing any other questions, so let's go ahead and move on to the next topic. Give us a little bit more time at the end.
All right, sounds good, Eric. So next slide, updates to vehicle eligibility requirements. So as of January 1st, 2023, zero emission powertrain certification, commonly known as ZEP-Cert, is now a requirement for new HVIP vehicle applications, including model year updates. With this new requirement, we're considering removing all electric range requirements from battery electric zero emission vehicles. Currently, new battery electric vehicles are required to demonstrate 35 miles of all electric range for eligibility. With the added requirement of ZEP-Cert, staff believes that this requirement is no longer necessary. And finally, as discussed, as we talked about earlier, V2G capability will be required for all school buses starting on January 1st, 2024. Guess we'll go into a quick round of comments and questions on what I just discussed.
Okay, our first question is going to come from Avtar. Avtar, go ahead. I've unmuted your microphone.
Hi there. This is Avtar. Calling from Bus Loop. We're a local private company out of Oakland, serving the Oakland Unified School District. We're one of many vendors of the school district, and my question, I did try asking earlier, but it is in regards to school buses. Are you familiar with the school side on what's a school bus and what's a SPAB certified vehicle?
Can you repeat that?
Sure. So I'm posing this question to you because of the
Just the last part, school bus, and I missed the acronym. Or
the SPAB, school pupil activity bus. So the buses that take them on field trips versus the daily home to school. Do you know the differences?
No, I do not.
Okay, so I think that's where I wanted some clarity, because the funding that is coming to the school buses, I want to see if that rolls over to the other buses that still provide school buses, but they're considered SPAB vehicles. They're not the yellow buses, they're the private charter buses that are vendors for the school districts. So can you guys explain a little on how the funding gets dispersed for those kind of companies?
Yeah, and so I can just answer on the HVIP side. So as far as school bus goes, we are talking about the yellow school buses that you described.
Okay, got it. And so would funds be available for charter bus companies that work with school districts?
Yeah, so charter bus companies, and this is just for HVIP again. Charter bus companies, they're eligible to apply for vouchers for a charter bus or like a shuttle bus that's not a school bus. They're eligible to apply. However, they're not going to get the school bus plus up.
Okay, and then if you're just one of many vendors, are you qualified to apply for the school buses, even if you don't have a school bus yet, but you plan to pivot into that market? How do you guys cater to those people that are in the transitioning point?
Transition from like a new company?
A charter bus to a school bus market.
Again, you have to be a school district, and someone else can chime in from school buses, Andrea, but as far as the vendors go, if they're a private company, then they're not eligible for the school bus plus up.
But the school buses are all privatized in Oakland Unified School District.
I believe if you're a operator who has a contract with a school district, you're eligible for the school bus plus for a school bus. Yes.
Got it. Even though you don't have any school bus, but you plan to buy your first school bus.
Yes, but you need to have an agreement with the school district.
So as long as you're a vendor and have a contract with the Unified District, that's all you need to make qualifications met.
Yes, and that's something that we can look more into. And if you want to just shoot me an email, my email will be provided at the end of the slides. You can shoot me an email and then we can figure it out.
Yeah, it sounds like this might be a discussion for you guys to have outside of this meeting.
Okay.
For me, it's just trying to understand the company themselves, and
right, because there's a lot of companies like myself and a lot of small people, like 5 to 10 vehicles, and we want to see how we're being included or not included in this funds.
Yep, sounds good. And so as I mentioned, feel free to shoot me an email and then we can figure it out together.
All right, thank you.
Okay, our next question is going to come from Brian. Brian, go ahead. I've unmuted your microphone.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, you're real echoey though.
I'll try to talk closer. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, but you're echoey, so let's try to maybe make the conversation brief. It's hard to understand.
Okay, I guess I would request that CARB reconsider the deletion of the 35-mile all-electric range requirement for HVIP, because sadly, and over the last few years, there have been many manufacturers of electric vehicles that I would call them vaporware. They can get an EO without demonstrating the vehicle actually can drive. And if anything, I would request that HVIP increases the all-electric range requirement to 50 or 100 miles, and that manufacturers demonstrate they have an operational vehicle to apply for the voucher.
Brian, can you state your affiliation? I don't think I caught it.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'm Brian Johnston. I'm with Lightning E-Motors.
Hey, Brian, thanks for the comment. That's something, let me take a look at that. And yeah, thanks for the comment again.
All right, thank you.
Okay, our next question or comment is going to come from Anne. Anne, I've unmuted your microphone.
Okay, great. Can you hear me?
We can. Thank you very much.
Perfect. I'm Ann Devine. I'm a CEO for a company called Janus Electric. We convert Class 8 diesel trucks from diesel to battery electric. So I know there were some conversations about conversions earlier. So the question is, and I saw that you talked about powertrain certification, and I'm not sure that this would work or is specific to this, but how do I find out if we can certify our battery electric complete powertrain, or if we have to do certification on every OEM that we can convert into, since they are already existing trucks up to 10 years old, we can convert?
Sounds good. Thanks for the question, Anne. Basically, right now for a retrofit, you'll need an aftermarket certification on your system. But if you send me an email after the work group meeting, I can definitely direct you to the right folks in our certification department who can provide you with a better answer on what's needed.
Perfect. And will your email be in the chat?
It's on the last slide, so it'll be coming up
Okay,
shortly.
thank you.
Okay, our next question or comment is going to come from Tom. Tom, go ahead. I've unmuted your microphone.
Yeah, thanks. Can you hear me okay, Pat?
I can hear you, Tom.
Yeah, thanks. Good to see you. Hey, on the
Hey, Tom, will you state your full name and affiliation?
I'm sorry, Tom Swenson with Cummins. I was just so excited to see Pat on the screen. Hey, on the vehicle to grid piece, we've been thinking a lot about what that would look like and the impacts to the customers as if they were going to use their vehicles in that manner. And one thing that we've been kind of, well, I don't, wrestling was probably too strong a term, but it is every time that battery discharges. So if it was discharging to power the vehicle or discharging to the grid, it's basically using, part of its useful life, much like running an engine. And it's going to consume, if you will, every time it discharges, some of the warranty and useful life. And I don't know how you want to think about that, but I guess I would hate to have a vehicle operator surprised that they were out of warranty much sooner than they would have expected because of how far they actually utilize the vehicle to do operations versus supplying the grid. So I don't know if that makes sense or not, but I think it's just a concern you need to be aware of, so you don't set an expectation and then have fleets go, well, wait, what do you mean I'm out of warranty?
Sounds good. Thanks for the comment, Tom. Now, the HVIP warranty requirement is for 3 years for the battery, and the whole vehicle is for 3 years and 36,000 miles. Do you think that's going to be an issue?
Well, so we're I think if we think about it in terms of how engines have been warranted, it's time, mileage, so calendar time, mileage, or engine hours. And so we're thinking about it in the same way, the electric in the same way. So it's calendar time, mileage, or battery discharge, which is essentially the same as engine hours. And that's that last one, I think, is the key piece, right? So the fleet would be okay on calendar time and mileage, but would have had so many discharge cycles that it would kick them out of the warranty provisions.
I see.
So something to think about. I don't
Yeah.
think we're going to solve it here. I just wanted to raise it as something for you guys to think about.
Yeah, sounds good. Because right
Yep.
now we do only have the calendar years and the mileage. So, and we did have the engine, quote unquote, engine hours for yard hostlers or yard trucks, but we're not doing that anymore. But yeah, that's something we'll discuss internally and see if there's anything that we can figure out.
Yep. Thanks.
Thanks, Tom.
Okay, thank you very much. Our next comment or question is going to come from Gary. Gary, have I muted your microphone?
Hi, my name is Gary Shui, and I'm with Two Daughters Logistics. My question is about how the ZEP cert requirement would affect the eligible vehicle list on the HVIP website. For example, have many manufacturers already certified for this model year?
Yeah, so as mentioned previously, this requirement started on January 1st, 2023. So if a manufacturer was able to obtain their 2023 EO and submitted their application before January 1st, 2023, then they were approved and they're on the website right now. The other vehicles that you see on the website, the model year 2022s, they're still eligible. The ZEPSA requirement is only for new vehicle models or new vehicle applications that were submitted after January 1st, 2023. So any new vehicle applications submitted, today and beyond, they'll need to have their ZEPSA EO in addition to their vehicle EO and the HVIP application to be considered for eligibility.
I see. Okay, so the ones that are listed now on the website are kind of, in a way, grandfathered in, and then any new ones we see that are added will have the certification. So we don't have, so as a purchaser, we don't have to worry about that.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we have time for a couple more questions. Next question or comment is going to come from Ryan. Ryan, I've unmuted your microphone. Please state your name and affiliation.
This is Ryan Bankard with UPS. Appreciate the time, Eric and Leslie. Good to see you. You look great as always. I have to jump on with what Tom Swenson said about the warranty. That's one thing that I think needs to be worked out. There's a lot of things that need to be worked out, but when it comes to small fleets, in particular, the warranty piece is going to be critical. There's a lot of ways that that warranty could be voided, and I had a CEO when I asked him about bi-directional capabilities on his fleet, or on their vehicles, laugh at me because he's like, why would you want to do that, right? And that was a year ago, 2 years ago at the ACT Expo. But the point is that there is, if you look at some vehicle warranties, if you use your vehicle in that manner as a bi-directional, it voids the warranty, to Tom's point, because you're using up the battery cycles. Some fleets or some vehicles will only warranty a battery if it loses 25% of its effectiveness. So essentially it's 75% of its capacity, which when you're talking about, buying the right size vehicle for your job as a small fleet, that could basically mean that you have an asset you can't really use, and then they're also not going to warranty it, right? Because a lot of times we say 80% charge or 80% effectiveness. Well, they're not going to warranty it until it gets to 75%. So something to think about, because as these smaller fleets are being incentivized, you're putting all the money towards smaller fleets, which is important. I think you should, because the more that they adopt these EVs and outlay that capital, the prices should come down for all of us. However, I think as you incentivize these smaller fleets, they may be moving towards potential problems that haven't been identified yet, whether it's warranty issues or battery recycling issues. They've already made a huge investment in these vehicles with the help of HVIP, but even with that HVIP, it's still a huge investment. And they may find that this technology is unproven, and they have vehicles that are unavailable for service, as well as other cost constraints that come up. So I just want to throw that out there. The warranty is a big part of it, and make sure that if you're going to push for bi-directional, that it doesn't void the warranty.
Sounds good. Thanks for the comment, Ryan. Now, the question I have is, so the V2G requirement is just for school buses, but as far as all the other vehicles in the HVIP catalog goes, is your comment asking for a stronger warranty requirement within HVIP?
I would even go a little further. I would say that if you're gonna put all this money towards small fleets, you got to have a safety net for them, because you're taking away the money from the big fleets, which the big fleets would raise the tides for everybody. We would already be working through some of these problems, whether it was warranty issues or recycling issues or things like that. The smaller fleets, they're going to need help. They're going to need, if you have 5 vehicles and one of them's down and you got to rent, you're making payments on 5 vehicles, and you might need to spend $1,500 a month renting a replacement vehicle, or $2,500 a month renting a EV replacement vehicle. So I think there should be some sort of safety net, whether it's for battery recycling, warranty, maintenance costs that come up down the road. Otherwise, these folks may go out of business because they invested millions of dollars in their fleets, only the 3, 4, 5 years have them not be able to be available for service.
Understood. Thanks for the comment. That's something that we'll definitely need to take a look at. Thanks for the comment.
You're welcome.
Okay, I'm looking at our timeline, and it looks like we got to move on to the next topic. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over.
All right, just 2 more slides. So other updates. Current policy prohibits stacking HVIP with other state programs, except for public transit agencies. As approved in the funding plan, we're modifying the policy to allow small fleets with 10 or fewer vehicles to stack with other state funds, such as the Carl Moyer program and the Truck Loan Assistance Program. Additional programs will be added to the IM as we identify them, but as always, fleets can stack HVIP with other federal or local funding sources. Now, when stacking funding, the other funding source must also allow stacking with HVIP. And next slide. Insurance requirements. HVIP requires the purchaser to own and operate the vehicle in California for a minimum of 3 years from the date of voucher redemption. HVIP also requires the fleet to insure the vehicle as required by law. Staff is considering providing a clarification in the IM that CARB will not claw back funding if the vehicle becomes non-operational due to damage that is not found to be intentional or due to negligence or fraudulent activity by the purchaser. This update is not intended to change the HVIP insurance requirement or provide recommendations as to how a fleet should insure a vehicle. We're simply providing a clear picture for fleets to make an informed decision alongside their insurance providers and lenders and lessors and whoever when determining their insurance needs. And finally, as we're updating our IM to better improve the program, we'll be considering other clarifications and updates as needed. Thank you for your time today, and I'll open up for the final round of questions and comments.
Thank you, Pat. Our first question or comment is going to come from Jennifer. Jennifer, go ahead. I've unmuted your microphone. Oh, no, I haven't. You dropped your, oh, there you go.
Sorry, I have a bulk PO question, so I'll wait to the end if there's any time.
Okay, I think we'll have time in the end for that.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
No worries. First question is going to come from Stuart. Stuart, I've unmuted your microphone. You got to unmute on your end too, Stuart. Stuart Collins?
Yeah, I'm here. Sorry.
There you go.
I was double muted. Hate that. Hi, Stuart Collins with Proterra. My question is about stacking. Specifically in the implementation manual, it gives a large list of things that can stack with HVIP. And there's even an example that basically calls out the VW Environmental Mitigation Trust as only stackable with public transit agencies. However, in the VW Environmental Mitigation Trust, it specifically says HVIP is not allowed stacking with HVIP. So that just means basically we can't stack with VW, right?
Correct. For stacking, both programs need to allow stacking with each other.
Okay, you might want to change the specific example that was given in the implementation manual that calls out VW Mitigation Trust Fund. Just as a heads up.
This is a new policy that we're considering, so.
Okay.
Yes. We'll take a look at that.
Thank you.
Our next question or comment is going to come from Gary. Gary, go ahead. I've unmuted your microphone.
Thank you. Gary Shui with Two Daughters Logistics. I do have a few questions. I'll try to make the first one very short. Are there any changes to the HVIP standard voucher dollar amounts themselves?
No, there's no changes to the base amounts. They stay the same.
Okay, cool. And then the next question is about stacking for a fleet of 15. It sounds like 15 vehicles would not be able to stack with anything else.
A fleet of 15 vehicles can stack. You can stack with federal funds or other local funds, but you cannot stack with other state funds.
Okay. Okay, thank you. And did you list, it sounded like there is a list of examples or sources in the implementation manual. I might have missed that.
Yeah, so right now we have the car memorial program and truck loan assistance program, but as we're developing the implementation manual, we'll be providing more programs, other state funds that can be stacked with HVIP.
Okay, for the small fleets, for the 10.
The small fleets, yes.
Okay, got it. Thank you. And then just a question about the fleet size itself. Obviously we're 15, so we'd love to see something for slightly larger than very, very small fleets of 10 or less. When is the right time to kind of discuss that in the future, since that's not part of this year's program?
Yeah, so every year we go through the process to develop the funding plan, and that would be the time to bring this up.
Okay, and that's usually starting in the summer?
It should be starting soon. Check out our website, or if you want to shoot me an email, I can direct you to the website with the calendar of events. But again, today's meeting is mainly on implementation and the development of the funding plan. Those discussions would be surrounding the policy side of HVIP.
Okay, thank you. And then last one, I promise for now. In terms of bonuses for disadvantaged communities, we're actually a package delivery COO, and we're domiciled in a non-DAC area, but we serve, more than half of our miles, half of our packages in a low-income community. So is there any accommodation for a situation like that?
At this time, no. For HVIP, it is based entirely off of the domicile location.
Okay. And is that also kind of a policy question for later? If that
could be a policy, yeah. That's something that you can bring up with the funding plan development.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Okay, our next question or comment is going to come from Dan. Dan, go ahead. I've unmuted your microphone.
Hey, thank you, Patrick. Nice to put a face to a name. I know we've traded a few phone calls and emails, so nice to see you. I had just a simple request, kind of similar to the lines I had earlier, which is, as you talk about school bus bidirectional charging, that can mean a lot of things. And, the specifically what that means could matter a lot to a manufacturer. And our ability to change anything about the way our bidirectional programs work today is shrinking, every day. In our world, it takes a year or two to develop and roll out anything that we would trust our customer, we would trust in our trucks. So I guess I would just ask that CARB, as soon as they're available, say, here's what we mean by that, because it could matter a lot to whether we're eligible or not. And I think that's probably true for everybody on the line here.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, thanks for the comment. Yeah, that's something that we'll look into. Maybe we can do an e-blast or something once we have it figured out.
Yeah, that'd be great. And maybe even feedback if you have an idea, like this is what we're thinking. We just want to make sure it doesn't, close out the whole school bus market accidentally or something.
Great, sounds good. Thanks for the comment.
Thank you.
Okay, our next question or comment is going to come from Beverly. Beverly, unmuted your microphone. Please state your name and affiliation.
Beverly Day Show, President Electric Vehicle Association of Central Coast. The comment that I want to make is sparked by hearing from Proterra. I want to implore you to make sure that the vehicles that are being replaced are scrapped in a way where they're actually scrapped and not just sent to the third world. The founder of Proterra told me that they were sending the school buses to developing countries because they're not our children. So that frightens me. And what we're looking at is the whole planet as an ecosystem, and we need to get them out of the ecosystem. So somehow CARB needs to take a stand in making sure that they are not being recycled over into developing countries. The other thing is I'm wondering also if you happen to have the name of the woman who spoke, who has the company that is doing the conversions, if you could give me that. And I want to say about battery warranty. Yes, that's still, that we're even having the conversation that it's advanced this far is amazing, because a couple of years ago it was not even a conversation. So the manufacturers still need to be in on the conversation as to what they would consider to be okay for their batteries. And when we talk about doing, at least for passenger vehicles, we're only talking about taking maybe 15%. If the vehicles can be aggregated, but that's with passenger vehicles, only taking maybe 15%. And due to the nature of the larger batteries now, we feel like it's not going to have such a very big effect on the life of it compared to the shelf life that the battery has. Thank you.
Thank you for the comment.
Okay, our next comment is going to come from Tatia. Tatia, I've unmuted your microphone.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Tasha Florence. I work with Ontario Montclair School District, and I was running late from another meeting, so I just want to see, is this recording going to be sent out along with the presentation?
So that's a great question. So we are recording this and we will be posting it onto our webpage. A copy of the slides are available online right now, and we can get a link to that and to where the recording will be posted here in the chat in a bit here. It typically takes us a couple days to QA QC the recording, but we expect it to be up in no less than 2 weeks.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and move on to our next topic, which is next steps.
All right, we're just about at time, so we're going to wrap up for today. But as always, if you have additional questions or comments that you didn't get a chance to make at today's work group, you're welcome to reach out. Our contact information is shown on this slide, and if you have not yet signed up to receive updates, you can do so at the link shown here. I'll just reiterate, as Andrea said, that a copy of the work group recording and a list of the work group attendees will be posted on CARB's low carbon transportation webpage within the next couple of weeks. Again, thank you all for taking the time to participate in today's work group, and your questions and comments have been very helpful. Lastly, enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Hey, hold on one second before we leave. Hey, Jennifer, can you raise your hand one more time? Yeah, I wanted to get, because we have just a couple minutes left, and I did call on you and then shut you back down. So let me unmute your microphone. Go ahead, Jennifer.
Okay, thank you. I'll try to be quick. It's regarding the bulk PO. I ordered the 34 vehicles January 30th. I wasn't sure when that started. I looked at the website and it says the bulk PO will be required to be uploaded to the VPC when the voucher batch progresses to the status of funded on or after April 3rd. So does that mean that we ordered them in time for before that change took place? Or does it have to do with the status of the voucher?
Yeah, so that has to do with the status of the voucher. The bulk purchase requirement started taking effect on January 1st. We are still in the process of doing a couple things for updating our voucher processing center to enable folks to really submit the data on that bulk purchase information. So by submitting now, you will still need to, or on January 30th, you will still be required to meet the bulk purchase requirements, but we've essentially saved your place in line. So funds will be set aside for you. You're basically in a waiting list, but we'll start to really process the application and request additional information beginning in the April timeframe once we have completed dealer training and have updated all of our systems.
Okay, so depending on where that's at, would I still get the incentive for the 30 or only the 4?
You would, so if you submitted after January 1st, you would initially have to meet that 30 purchased without any HVIP assistance. So you would only be getting vouchers for 4.
Okay, regardless of the status, it just has to be before April 3rd.
So it's basically what we're looking at is the date that you submitted the application. And if that came in after January 1st, you are subject to those bulk purchase requirements. The April 3rd is just reflecting when we expect to see those moving forward in the voucher processing center.
Okay, thank you so much for answering.
Of course.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, for joining.
Thank you all.